Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thinnest Veil podcast. I'm Dr. Melissa Bird, and I am so happy to be bringing here today to you my beautiful friend, Michelle Hawk. How are you, Michelle?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Melissa. Thank you so much for inviting me. And to all of you tuning in, I'm happy to be here. And I hope this is helpful, inspiring, insightful.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
do too. So for those of you who are listening, Michelle and I. Wait, before we get into this, Michelle, would you introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. I like how we're just assuming everyone already knows who I am.
You're amazing.
Thank you. I saw you mentioned me in one of your emails I just saw. So I'm like, of course, everyone already knows who I am. I'm a shaman. And I think we're going to talk about even just me saying that during this episode. I am a shaman. And I'm also an alchemist. I'm an energy healer, medium, and I've been practicing for 22 years. So since 2003, I began my study and training in shamanism. I am a multi-lineage practitioner, so the primary lineage that I hold comes from what is now Hungary, from the Shaman clan Baksha, but I have also studied and practiced with teachers from the Celtic shamanic traditions, as well as North and South American indigenous teachers, and touching upon lineages that come from West Africa. So I am a multi-lineage human embodied, a multi-lineage practitioner in my practice and my service, and I live just outside of Portland, Oregon, and I work with people in their own personal healing work, but also practitioner training and mentorship and practical spiritual skill development.
Yay! You're
Woo.
amazing. Um, I'm just really happy to be talking to you today because we're gonna we're gonna shake some shit up. And one of the things that you and I have both really connected on is how do I want to put this? Authenticity in practice. So you and I have both struggled with talking about who we are as spiritual practitioners and healers because of the way um, some people give spirituality practice a not so savory feeling at the end of the day. And in some cases are actually really dangerous with their clients
Mhm.
and shouldn't be practicing. And so I think I want to really start by talking about um, you mentioned it at the top, right? Like you even saying the word shaman out loud is loaded with so much uh, baggage.
Yeah.
And I want to start with what people don't understand about what it means to be a shaman
Mhm.
and also what people don't understand about that term.
Yeah.
And then I would really love to see where that goes. Let's see where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. How about we start with what is a shaman and where
Yes.
does that word even come from?
Yeah.
So what is a shaman and what is it not? The if you look online for what is a shaman or where did this word shaman come from, the most common explanation that you will see is that it is a word that comes from the Tungusic language of the people of Siberia, and it means the one who knows. And you usually see it spelled out as saman with like a little squiggle over the s, like saman, meaning the one who knows. This is the most prolific explanation of where does the word shaman come from, what is that, and then also this has informed schools of thought such as Michael Harner's School of Shamanic Studies that says that shamanism really only comes from Siberia, and this is profoundly not true. So the story that I learned from my lineage, from my shamanic great grandfather, meaning my teacher's teacher's teacher, who was the shaman of his tribe, his community in Hungary, is that the word shaman comes from the Mesopotamian sun god Shamash. And the priests and priestesses of Shamash were called Shyamas, and they are the ones who serve the light. So the ones who are working in service to the light of the divine, the light of inner knowledge, the light of understanding, as Shyamas being what we're now calling shamans. Now, when people get fired up about, oh, you can't call yourself a shaman, or oh, that's a loaded term, like the whole reason why it took me I think about 2 years, 2 or 3 years after my mentor initiated me to actually use that word and call myself a shaman, is because, Melissa, as you mentioned, of that misunderstanding that people have this very loaded, like, just an honest misunderstanding of what that word means and where it comes from. And I think the way that people most often misinterpret that is that shaman, they're conflating shaman with a Native American spiritual practice, particularly because we live on Turtle Island, we live in North America, and of course there are many indigenous peoples who all have their own animistic traditions of spiritual practice. And of course we have a very long history of, um, you know, miss not doing that in a good way, of extracting knowledge and wisdom and oppressing people, and creating a really, like, distorted power over dynamic. So that is all true. And of course, the people who are conflating that, it's an honest misunderstanding, but the word shaman is not that's not the word in any Native American tradition. That would be, I'm not calling myself a medicine person in the language of those people. I'm not doing that. So the word shaman actually came from white anthropologists making
Of
up a
course it did.
term.
Why wouldn't it come from white anthropologists?
Right. Yeah, it came from white anthropologists making up a term, or extracting that word from either the Tungusic language or from the Shamas, as I mentioned, to describe the role of a person that they were seeing consistently in tribes all over the world as a medicine person, a spiritual guide, a healer, one who was in communication with the spirit realm. That's what shaman means. So it is actually the most appropriate term to call myself for multiple reasons. In that, it comes from my lineage, my shamanic lineage has connections to the Mesopotamian people, the Sumerian people back through the ages, and so that's the story of where that word comes from. And then also the white anthropologist piece. So it's the best word for
Right.
this. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have in pop culture understanding, it has a commonly agreed upon definition of, like, oh, it's most appropriate also in, I'm not only an energy healer, I'm not only a medium, I'm not only a, fill in the blank, I am a shaman. It's all of these different pieces that inform that. And we can
Right.
get into the nitty gritty of what that means a little bit more. But how's this feeling? Are we
Oh
unpacking it?
yeah, no, this is great. This is great. We're just rolling.
Let's keep rolling. Okay, great. So
Yeah,
yeah, so
I
what is, go ahead.
I really think I really think people um are really confused about what is an animistic spiritual practice. I
Mm-hmm.
think people are really confused about plant medicine and how to use plant medicine
Mm-hmm.
safely and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if you could tell me, if we could talk a little bit about what you wish people knew and understood about those things.
Yeah, I'm going to take it back one step further and share what is animism.
Mm,
And for those who don't know, and you're bringing up a really great rabbit hole that we're going to dive down in regards to plant medicine. So shamanism is as I mentioned, it's not like only an energy healer, it's not only a medium, but shamanism is both an animistic and a mediumistic practice. And what animism is in a nutshell, it is the belief in the life force in all things, and that we are connected through that unifying life force. So animism is, the rocks are alive, and the plants are alive, and the animals are alive, and the water is alive and has a spirit. And this is where we get our polytheistic sensibilities from. If you look at the like any folk tales from any culture anywhere in the world, they are animistic in nature. They talk about, oh, a quester arriving at a sacred spring and then speaking to the spirit of the spring and receiving some wisdom, or being sent on some kind of quest. Like that is an animistic relationship. The water is alive and there is a spirit of the spring who is offering some kind of wisdom exchange or teaching or blessing. Like that is animism. And then the feeling that we get when we're out walking in the forest and we put our hands on the trees and we feel that surge of energy, that is also an animistic orientation. But shamanism is not only animistic, it is also mediumistic. And mediumship, A mediumistic practice is the communication and relationship with the non-corporeal realm, with the spirit realm. So this is where we have conversations with etheric beings. We receive wisdom transmissions from the spirit of the spring or from the trees or from our etheric guides and teachers. And we're in an active working communication and relationship with those beings. That is shamanism. Animism plus mediumship. Pure and simple. And then, of course, applied in all of these different ways, usually through healing work, plant medicine work that you mentioned. So plant medicine. Plant medicine is a tiny, tiny slice of the shamanic pie, and yet it is very in vogue right now. It is getting very, very up on the surface, more on the
It's
surface.
super sexy right now.
So sexy, right? For
Okay.
better or for worse, right?
Right.
And a little bit of both, honestly. Like there's blessings in that, and there's also some pretty extreme challenges. But I remember back in whenever it was 2014 maybe that I actually like quote came out as a shaman to my community. And again, I received my initiation from my teacher in 2012. It took me 2 years to actually start using that word because of all of these loaded connotations and people with with like well-intended it was always a well-intended call out, but it was still a call out because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So when I did finally start using that word shaman, I pretty consistently had people ask me, "Oh, do you serve ayahuasca?" Or do that was the one that people were asking about in 2014. And because that was what they knew of as shamanism. And I said, "No, I don't. That is a very, like, yes, it is a shamanic practice, but it's not like the majority of shamanism in the world, and it's not what I do." So,
And it's
and
very specific
it's very specific.
and very, dare I say, indigenous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, where does the plant come from? It comes from the Amazon rainforest. It comes from the jungle. And so there are, really, to my knowledge, the only intact lineage of a tribe that is working with grandmother ayahuasca plant medicine is the Shipibo people in Peru. And the reason that they managed to stay an intact lineage was that they're at elevation and really hard to get to relative to other areas in South America from European colonizers coming over. But in Brazil, for example, there are many indigenous tribes who have really suffered loss of lands, suffered genocide, suffered attacks on their people, been evicted and sent to other lands, and they lost touch with their cultural and spiritual heritage. And it's been through a really like deeply devoted like front on all fronts with their legal status. I know actually, I personally know a chief of one of the tribes who was enslaved until he was maybe 11 years old. He was born into slavery, and then eventually the tribe, um, you know, gained some kind of legal status, and then they were no longer enslaved, and now he's the chief of the tribe. So that is a very, like, people think of this as kind of long ago, but no, it's within our generation, it's within our lifetime of human history.
Yeah.
And so within that, there's been just within the last couple of decades this very strong cultural and spiritual renaissance in the Brazilian tribes, or in many of the Brazilian tribes, in their practice of ayahuasca. And but they were able to do that through anchoring into the Santo Daime lineage that was held, and that's kind of it's a syncretic tradition that sort of draws from Judeo-Christian mysticism as well as West African mysticism as well as indigenous wisdom, and it's kind of all boiled together. And that lineage, Santo Daime, has it's all over the world now, but it was really through connecting with Santo Daime that the indigenous tribes in Brazil were able to go through this renaissance. So looking at like how is ayahuasca, and now it's everywhere. Right now everyone is drinking medicine. And in some ways, again, the gifts and challenges of that. The gifts are people are having much more ubiquitous access to very powerful healing work. And the challenges are like so enormous. It makes me so alarmed, the availability that this
Let's
is
talk
in the
about that
world.
alarm because I think it's really important. I think it's very important because
Yeah.
because of what you said a little bit earlier, that's it's still tinkling in my head that plant medicine is actually just a very small piece of what shamanism is and means, but
Mm.
somehow we have turned it in this spirituality community into this you must like it's almost like if you haven't done this, who are you? What are you doing?
There's definitely a little bit of a cool kids club vibe with it, and it's very shiny, and um, I think this is for a handful of reasons, and also let's clarify plant medicine, like all plants are medicine.
Sure.
They're everywhere there's medicine everywhere. Outside here, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and just yesterday I was harvesting wild St. John's wort to make an anointing oil. Like there is plant medicine, and that is plant medicine everywhere. And, so there's very specifically this fascination in herbalism, plant medicine, this fascination with these psychedelic, psychotrope, entheogenic plant medicines. And I think I think it is multifold. On one hand, like, we're working with these very powerful spiritual forces that have their own life force and have their own agenda. And we're working with we collectively as a human experience are working with these very powerful forces. And, grandmother ayahuasca has her own agenda for how she is wanting to emerge in human consciousness. So we cannot ignore that. And all of the medicine beings that come in concert with her and with this, this collective field have their own agenda and their own life path and purpose. And we are naive little children of Pachamama. We are naive little youngins on Gaia. And we are generally speaking, a fundamentally wounded society full of fundamentally wounded people who are really hungry for anything that will help. And it is, I think it's very attractive, especially in the modern Western world where we are conditioned from a very young age to instant gratification, to efficiency, to open source information. We're used to, the like entire libraries are online for people to just click and read anything at all, or you can take, courses are available on YouTube everywhere. Like we're very used to the ubiquitous availability of information technology. And we don't have generally experience with rite of passage initiatory experiences. We don't have an embodied relationship with earned wisdom. We don't have an embodied relationship with how to live an animistic lifestyle where you're walking barefoot on the ground every day and you're gathering water out of the stream and you're making offerings and you're garden harvesting food from your garden. We don't live that lifestyle. So we show up with all of our modern Western conditioning and our expectations and our entitlement, honestly, to bring that consciousness, not with any malice, no bad agenda. Like people who show up at medicine ceremonies, I am certain like there is there's a spectrum in that too. I know there are people who just go because it's basically like a concert where you're tripping with your friends. Like there's those people, but there are people who show up with a sincere desire to receive profound healing. And um and that is possible. And also without proper anchoring and context and energetic awareness and energetic hygiene, it is a very vulnerable experience that I think the majority of people who engage with sacred plant medicines go in woefully unprepared or underprepared to work with that in the safest, most effective way. And let me be very clear, I'm not a gatekeeper. I don't want to like prevent,
No.
this. I'm not saying that people should not do this. I'm not saying that this is not like this is a thing. I'm just saying be careful. And there are things that you can know and prepare for and hold yourself in the best possible way. Go in with your eyes open. I really do believe that animism is our Gaian birthright, and shamanism is a way that we can practice that. And I really do hold I'm here anchoring in that field for everybody who wants to learn and who wants to do this in a good way. Melissa, as you mentioned right at the beginning, with authenticity, but responsible authenticity. How
Yes.
do we do this in a good way that is safe as possible for ourselves, and honoring and respectful of the traditions and of the medicines that we're working with. And with sacred plant medicine, it has spread like wildfire in pop culture consciousness. And I do know of examples of it really messing people up. And also, I know examples of it having very profound, very powerful, very long lasting beneficial healing effects as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to have the I don't I know one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you, particularly on the podcast, is not because I think you're a gatekeeper, and not because I mean I know I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
but I really want people to start to explore healing, right? The whole entire point of the Thinnest Veil podcast is to start to have multifaceted conversations about
Mm-hmm.
all different sorts of topics so that we can explore religion and spirituality and healing and how those things um are a part of our everyday lives. And I've been having these incredible conversations about love with my friend Kat, and I just am having these amazing conversations with my friend Dolly about um immigration and like how that influences our lives. um Sonic interference, my favorite.
Yeah.
And how that influences our spiritual lives in particular, to be in that really liminal space as immigrants. And to be talking to you about this, I think is so important because I do want people to experience that where they are being called to medicine, right? Like I think it's really important for us to flow with that and hear where we are being called. And also to remember that, especially here in this country, we are really good at taking things to a whole nother level of extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to be aware that this stuff can be dangerous. Like this is, as you said, all plants are medicine. And also, I'm not going to be going out and eating belladonna. Like that's just not, it's not going to happen, right? Um, that's not a tea I'm going to drink. And so
Right.
I want people to be aware. I think this conversation is really important to demystify the idea of shamanism, to really bring into the room the idea of cultural appropriation. It's why so many people don't engage with their ancestral healing practices,
Mm-hmm.
and to really weave the tapestry of this knowledge that what we are talking about are beautiful mystical experiences, right? And when we
Mm-hmm.
engage with mystical experiences, our hearts expand and our souls open, and we heal and we connect to the land and to our bodies and to ourselves. So what are, if you if you could impart any wisdom on whoever listens to this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
um what do you want them to take away from this conversation? Like what do you want them to walk away knowing from this conversation and this idea of, I think especially this idea of entitlement to medicine ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
What a very
Right.
capitalistic way of thinking about medicine.
What a what way?
It's a very capitalistic way of thinking about medicine, is this entitlement to have it.
Yeah. I mean, I think inherently the spiritual industry, which I really just don't like using that term, but let's be real, that's a thing here.
Thing.
And I have a career in the spiritual industry, which is just so strange to me, but it is real. Uh, the that is very plagued by the modern Western idea of the hyper individualism upon which the United States was founded. And of course, you may have international listeners here, but we both live in the US, and this is the context that we're living in right now. So, this hyper individualism, this fixation, this almost like weird fetishization of me, my healing, my wounds, navel gazing.
Yeah.
It is, um, there's a difference, I think, between sovereignty, true sovereignty, which recognizes and honors, well, if I am sovereign, then all beings are sovereign. and and then this weird entitled, like, I am the center of my own personal universe. And like, there's, I think all healing is best done with what I call like one eye on the I am, one eye, and in this case we have three eyes, one on the I, one eye on the I am, one on the we are, and one on the all is. So inherently contextualizing ourselves. And I think that is one of the pieces that is, when you talk about the capitalism, the capitalistic orientation of entitlement to medicine work, or um, I think that is, that context gets lost in people's personal healing process. And we must remember that shamanism is inherently and necessarily contextual. So the the relationships, and we're using our Amazonian relations a lot in this conversation, so I'll keep using that vein. So for example, in the tribes in the Brazilian Amazon, the and I mentioned previously like the animistic folk tales having, and the polytheistic view of like, oh, the divinity of these different nature spirits, for example. It was the nature spirits around them. It was based in what is the ecology of where you live. So in
Right.
the Amazon, they're working with jiboya, like the boa constrictor and jaguar, and in Peru, the hummingbird, and the chacruna vine, and like, all these forces that are
Yeah.
local. It is a contextual relationship. And then over here in the Pacific Northwest, we're working with salmon, we're in cedar, and like and Mount Hood, for example, and the spirit of the local rivers. And then in the American Southwest, coyote and vulture. And it's, and all of these figures are again, it's all about the relationship. You can't just borrow the spirit guides and the spiritual forces of another culture that you don't have a relationship to. That's not how shamanism works. It's not that like, oh, I went to this event here and that teacher called upon, name five guides, so I'm going to call upon five guides. It's like, no, that those aren't beings that you have relationships with. Going back
Right.
to what is shamanism, it is animistic, so it's that life force in all things and the connection through all things, and mediumistic, having a functionally purposeful personal relationship with the spirit realm and with our guides and teachers and initiated allies. That is the root of shamanic practice. It's not, can you rattle and like wave some feathers around. That's not doing anything if it's not rooted in the energetic relationship. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and it makes me wonder, like, why are we so attracted to the performance?
I mean, on one hand, it's, I mean, I like feathers. Like, I
Sure,
get it,
right. I mean, yeah, hello. And also, like,
Yeah.
that's
It,
the way we tumble into potentially not being with true and authentic people, right? Or being around people that like this capitalistic orientation to
right. But
overuse and overproduction.
I think it's also a misunderstanding though. So in the imagine if you go into any kind of ceremony, not only a plant medicine ceremony, but if you go into, for example, a sweat lodge ceremony, or you go into a Sundance ceremony, or pick your favorite, right? A solstice ceremony at Stonehenge, and you don't know the underlying energetic foundation and the architecture of a ceremony, and you don't have the capacity to tune into the frequencies of what is happening, you will see people blowing smoke around, waving feathers, laying down items on an altar. Like, you will see the material expressions
Yeah.
of a ritual practice or of a ceremonial practice. And that's what you're going to pay attention to. Because if you don't understand why and the energetic architecture of what they're doing, or, okay, I'm laying down an offering, but it's after I made the energetic offering and now I'm offering the physical piece. Or you see them waving feathers, but you don't understand, okay, are they waving feathers to clear something away? Are they waving feathers to bring in the spirit of the wind? Are they waving feathers to invoke a particular energy? Are they waving feathers to blow a song or a piece of soul into somebody? There's a bajillion reasons why someone could be waving feathers around. It's not arbitrary.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand the context, again, it's all about the context and the energy behind it, it's going to look like, oh, this is what you do. It's going
Yes.
to, Right.
Yes.
It's going to look like a cool show.
Yeah.
Because, but that's not what's happening. It's the physical expression of this much deeper etheric and energetic experience underlying the physical motions.
Yeah, I just love that. Thank you so much for that. And also what was really like what I was realizing a lot of people don't understand also is that I've been thinking about this a lot because we just had, I'm an Episcopal preacher, right? I'm a lay preacher, and we just had, the Easter wasn't that far long ago. It was just a couple
Mhm.
months ago.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of smoke and fire and symbolism and cleansing that happens around Good Friday
Mhm.
and the resurrection. And I mean, like, it's one of my favorite because it's so ritualistic.
Yeah.
And it's such a great reminder that there are many, 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 if not all, traditions use smoke for cleansing.
Yep.
They use feathers for moving things in and out.
Mhm.
That there are so many practices and rituals that have the same tools because those were the tools available tens of thousands of years ago, right?
Yeah. But not only those are the tools available, think about these wisdoms, like how do people even know to
Right,
eat certain plants or to like put drops in the eyes or to ferment this thing with this thing? Like they
right.
know because they're in that very intimate communication
Yes.
with
With
the spiritual forces. And
yeah,
we see this in modern, this idea, I forget the name of this principle, but there's a name, a scientific name of this principle where, and we have this again in modern culture, where scientific innovation within like 2 weeks of each other, a very short period of time, this same scientific breakthrough will pop up in like 4 different places on Earth because you have people putting out the channel of, hey, we're looking at this, or we're, whoever, whatever. And then the spiritual forces are right, okay, we're going to dispense some wisdom. Who's got the channel open? Who can hear us?
right.
That's why you had the
Yeah,
the breakthrough on the structure of DNA. That was one of my favorite examples of like 3 different people in the span of about a week or 2 weeks discovered the structure of DNA all at the same time after like, decades of
right.
looking or
Yeah.
however long. So the same is true spiritually, where you see all over the world, there's so many examples of this, of like, there's ubiquitous examples of dragons and serpents in creation mythology all over the world at
Right.
a time when it would have been really hard for all these different people from all over the place to talk to each other and converge on and
Right,
collectively agree
exactly.
upon these.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, smoke as clearing. We see this in it's a pan-cultural concept. It falls under the umbrella of what I call universal shamanism. Like these principles, these core pieces that are universal to shamanic practice, ubiquitous to cultures all over the world, and then may have their particular expressions, of course. And like here, cedar is available, so we're burning cedar. In the Southwest, you got sage. In somewhere else, you burn something else. In the Celtic Isles, you're burning mugwort
Yep.
because that's the plants that are available there. But the universal principle is the same.
Yes.
So this is, one of the pieces where the more I study, again, I'm a multi-lineage practitioner. The more I study, I'm like, it's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's all the same stuff, but with different faces, different expressions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people who are seeking medicine?
Plant medicine, sacred
Uh,
plant medicine,
Plant
or all medicine?
medicine, all medicine. I want to because
Mhm.
I think the sexiness of plant medicine needs to be talked about and what advice you have for people so that they can be cautious and understand what they're entering into, like who
Yeah.
they are connecting with too.
Yeah.
And then also all medicine, like I think people are really, like you said earlier, like we are a fundamentally wounded cohort of human beings right now.
Yeah, that's
And
a good word for it, our cohort here on Earth. Yeah, so cautions in regard to plant medicine. I
Mhm.
know the idea of going down to South America is very appealing to people, and I hear people say, "Oh, if I'm going to do it, I want to go to South America," which is great. And also, if you don't speak the language and if you don't have like a really trusted referral connection, I would be extremely cautious. because you're just popping into somebody else's ecosystem. You don't know them from anybody and you'll never see them again. So if you have a really difficult landing experience or a difficult integration experience, there is no accountability, there is no follow up necessarily. So it is actually, in some ways, a really great idea, especially at the beginning. Find a trusted local practitioner because you can, you speak the language, you go somewhere that like somehow you have contact with them and like ask for referrals or recommendations. There are ways to kind of sniff out the well trusted and well reputed from the less so, and of course people are very sneaky, so there's all sorts of convoluted things that might be at play. I would also very strongly recommend for people, if possible, to go in with some degree of energetic awareness, sensitivity, and hygiene as personal responsibility. Now, this is the difference between, like, there's always going to be risk whenever you're interacting with very powerful spiritual forces, particularly with the use of sacred plant medicines. It is a very powerful portal, and all sorts of stuff can come through, all sorts of stuff can come up from the people who are in the space. Even in the most safely and ethically and responsibly facilitated containers, there's still a risk. But that's equivalent to, are you getting in a car and driving wearing a seatbelt with very well lit roads in a perfectly functioning car? Yeah, you still might get in an accident, but you're much mitigating the risk as opposed to driving at night with your seatbelt off while drunk. Like, there's just different ways that you can approach that to take personal responsibility as much as you can and mitigate risk factors, to be able to clear yourself, to clear your own energy, to set up an effective protection field, to discern beings who are working with divine law and of the light and love versus beings who are not, who might be coming in to work with your fields, how to ground and stabilize yourself, how to move energy through your body when you're having a very powerful or uncomfortable experience, how to call upon your spirit allies to support you. All of these things are really useful skills that, again, mitigate those risk factors.
That's really, really good advice. And the other thing that just really strikes me is that, because of this sort of social media, googly landscape that we find ourselves living in, um, I think it's really important for people to pay attention to their intuition. Like, if you do not have a good feeling about something or someone, listen to that. Like, really pay attention to that. I was just telling you that this last week I was asked to speak at something and I just had this really odd feeling about it. And I Google searched the person who was emailing me and was like, oh no, like they'd been involved in scamming somebody and really causing great harm. And now they're doing this healing spirituality thing, and I was like, oh no, this is not good, and I
Mm-hmm.
I almost ignored it because I was like, well, I want to get on as many stages as possible and have as many conversations as possible, and you know what I mean, like I almost didn't listen to myself. And because sometimes that voice that says, I don't think this is the person for me, gets overridden by this idea. No, but I need to heal, I need to fix this, I am having a problem,
Mm-hmm.
this person swears they can help me,
Yeah.
and that gets overridden. So I really love what you just said there, because I think it, when we're grounded in that intuitive sense, we really can feel whether or not someone is for us or not.
Yeah, way to follow your intuition. And then there's something else you said, Melissa, in terms of, oh, I want to get on as many stages as possible, but I should, be visible. There's this, that's playing into this sense of urgency also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Or, oh, I need to heal. I need to, I think I also see this in, very prevalent in this community as like, oh, I have to do it yesterday. I have to do it as fast as possible. And, it's great to be enthusiastic and it's great to pursue our healing journey. But also, there's sort of a threshold point where how we are subjecting ourselves to healing experiences becomes kind of self flagellatory.
Yeah.
of, oh, there's something wrong with me, so I need to
Yes.
go fix it. Oh, there's something, I made this mistake, or I'm not on the right path, so I need to go pursue whatever outside of myself to tell me what to do, rather than just, I'm going to create some stillness in my own experience and compassion for if I feel like something might be off. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means I can listen a little deeper and hold myself in that. And then from a place of healthy discernment, choose what to engage in or who to invite in or what kind of support to invite into my healing process.
Ugh, that word discernment's my favorite.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Michelle.
You're welcome.
If people want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
They can find me on my website, michellehawk.com. And I do have a guide. If you are, let me also say, like, if you are called to the shamanic path, I'm going to back up just one moment, okay? If you are called to the shamanic path, one of the things that I hear pretty consistently from people who contact me, whether it's they're wanting to receive shamanic healing, but really more particularly for people who are like, wow, I feel really called to pursue this for my personal practice. And I've literally heard this from multiple people in consultations. I don't want to be just another middle-aged white lady calling myself a shaman. Like, there is this trepidation, there's the fear, because there's the desire to do it with integrity and the desire to do it well. The answer is not don't practice shamanism. The answer is not suppress your calling. The answer is not put it aside because it's only for a certain group of people. That's not the answer. The answer is to approach it with rigorous integrity. And that means, I know we're going a little long. I have a whole other vein for
You're
us to
okay.
go to. Can we do that? Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah, I've
so
got a couple minutes, so try and do
couple
it
minutes. Okay,
quickly.
I'll keep it tight. Okay. Um, Ancestral reclamation. Melissa, you started to touch upon this too, of like cultures all over the world using smoke for clearing. This this is, no matter where you live on earth and no matter what your heritage is, you as a Gaian being have a fundamental connection with an animistic orientation and a shamanic orientation already encoded in you. You do not have to be indigenous Turtle Island lineage. You do not have to be indigenous South American lineage. You do not have to be any particular group of people in order to cultivate a personal and meaningful and respectful shamanic practice. And the way that we do that is through rigorous integrity and responsible authenticity, working with the principles of universal shamanism and pursuing training and mentorship in a particular lineage if you're called to a particular lineage, but also, as I mentioned, I'm a multi-lineage practitioner. I've worked with many different people, and what now has settled into the core of my being is not only the Hungarian lineage that I hold, not only the Celtic lineage that I hold, also informed by the teachings and the studies that I've received from all these other practitioners, because we live in a modern era that has so much more syncretization and mixing in our own bloodlines, in our consciousness, in our information, our intellect, and in our spiritual practice. And we can do that very respectfully. So we're not, diluting the potency of wisdom transmissions. We're not disrespecting cultures. We're not just making it up as we go. But this is part of how we responsibly engage with our studies to learn from and to anchor into, and then allow the mysteries, which are living entities. The mysteries and the teachings are not stagnant, lifeless entities. They are living beings. And we respect the lineages by allowing them to live in us and to evolve themselves. Because what is fundamentally true will always be true. Just like the law of gravity is a universal law, it will always be true. The laws of energetic dynamics of right relation and respect and integrity and compassion and reciprocal generosity will always be true because they are universal laws. But how they express through us as modern Western people will be different than how they may have originally expressed thousands of years ago. And we respect the lineages enough, we must respect the lineages enough to allow them to live through us fully
Yeah.
in the context that would be useful and helpful and in service to the world, to our own personal healing, to the lineages themselves.
Yeah.
So it is not for the faint of heart. This inquiry, it takes a lot of A lot of inquiry and a lot of reflection and a lot, I've been working with my shaman mentor since 2009. Like it, and I still come to her with questions like this sometimes of like, okay, can I do this? Is this okay? Is this the right way to do
Well,
this?
and it's a lifetime. I think this is what I want people to really understand. This is not a one and done scenario. Like you're not going to go do some ceremony and be like, boom, done.
Yep.
This excavation is a
That's a great word for
lifetime.
it.
It's a lifetime of excavation. It doesn't just end once we've done some sort of special ceremony.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
one of my
absolutely.
favorite shamans actually is from Scotland. So, I mean, like it just, anyway, I could go
Yeah.
on all day, but I can't because
Okay, I'll tighten it up now. Okay, I just had to go
I
there. If you're called to the shamanic path, you can talk to me or talk to any other mentor who is asking these kinds of questions and pursue it in a way that is responsible and integrous. You can, if you would like to talk to me, you can do that through my website, michellehawk.com, Michelle Hawk like the bird. And then also in the show notes, I believe there will be a link. People can download a guide. I have a free guide for you. It's about how to activate your shamanic gifts and work with your shamanic gifts. So if that calls to you, you can download the free guide. Check out my podcast, Shaman Sister Sessions, where Melissa will be a guest at some point soonish.
yes.
And I would love to hear from you if this resonates for you. So send me an email.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I love talking to you. It brings me such joy.
Oh, likewise. This
Have
was
a
so
great
great.
day.
Thank you.